Alright folks, so recently I read The Will of the Many by James Islington or Islington. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, but it's one of the two. So I was invited to be a part of Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews. He does this giant compilation at the end of the year where every booktuber that he invites talks about their favorite book that was published that year, right? And so I went through the books that I had read this past year, and none of them were published in 2023. So I had to scramble, and I picked a book off my TBR that had been published in 2023, and it just so happened to be The Will of the Many. Now, this book had caught my eye because I had heard a lot of good things about it from other book reviewers. And so going into it, I was like, okay, this seems like a good option for me to read. Hopefully I'll enjoy this and it'll give me some good things to say in the video for Matt. And it definitely didn't disappoint. I very much enjoyed reading this book. I thought it was really freaking good, honestly. I was flying through it by the end. So without giving away any spoilers, I'll just quickly summarize what this book is about. So in The Will of the Many, there is this empire called the Hierarchy. Now, the whole book is based in this kind of like Roman fantasy world, right? Everybody's wearing togas, giant statues and monuments, and there's a scene where there's something similar to a Colosseum, and all of the words are very Italian or Romanesque. And at first I was a little bit thrown off by this whole Roman vibe, but as I sunk into the story, it became easier to go along with. That's for sure. In this Roman Empire, they have this kind of magic system called the hierarchy. And the way the hierarchy works is that there's 8 levels, right? With the 8th and bottom level being the lowest level, which has the majority of the population on it. And they show it in the book as this kind of pyramid, which I think I can actually show on screen. We're going to have a visual reference here. So there you see the Catton rankings. Now this chart is actually pretty important for understanding the story. Essentially the way this kind of magic system works is that each person in this world has a certain amount of will to give. They get this will, or their will becomes accessible by submitting themselves to something called the Columni, which happens when they start to reach adulthood. And that's essentially them submitting to the empire of the hierarchy. And when they submit to the Columni, they make their will accessible to people of a higher status than them. The Octavists have nobody below them, right? So they're not taking any will from anybody else, but the Octavists are giving their will to the Septimus rank people. And the Septimus rank people are giving their will to the Sextus rank, and then to the Quintus, and then to the Quartus, Tertius, Dimitis, Princeps, right? That's how it goes. And if you look at the chart, I'll keep it up on screen, but you'll see that each rank of people has sequentially more will to pull from until you get to the Princeps, which is like, you know, they're taking the will of tens of thousands of people, which makes them incredibly powerful. And so this will then allows them to do all sorts of incredible athletic endeavors and strength feats, but also you can use it as like a magic system, basically, right? You can hit people with it, you can throw objects with it, you can power these crazy flying vehicles with it. There's all these crazy inventions that are enabled by the will. Now, the book never really gets into how the will actually works, but nevertheless, I found the will to be just an interesting magic system to include in the book. So the main character of this book is this young adult named Viz, and he think he's roughly 17, 18 at the beginning of the book. He's an orphan, right? We're introduced to him at the beginning of the book. He's living in an orphanage. We don't know much about him other than the fact that he has not submitted to the Columni, so he hasn't given up his will just yet. And he's fighting in this mini gladiatorial arena. It's not very glamorous or anything. He's basically just fighting for small amounts of money, and it seems like he's barely making it by. But we quickly start to learn that Viz is much more intelligent and capable than your typical orphan. So without giving too much away, Viz is an orphan because of something the hierarchy did. This is essentially the beginning of his revenge story. How is he going to go from a nobody to somebody with enough power to deal some sort of punishment to the empire that is the hierarchy? So along the way, as we're watching Viz progress into the world, he ends up at this academy. And this academy is crucial to him and his plans to take revenge on the hierarchy. Now, I'm not going to get into any of the details, but I feel like the academy training school trope is pretty well done, so you can kind of know what to expect. You know, you're going to have, you know, some good classroom scenes, some good training scenes, fighting scenes, interclass politics with the teachers, and how those teachers then connect to the outside world, all this different stuff. I think the academy trope has been done quite a few times, but I really enjoyed this. Like, I don't know what it is about kind of the school environment that becomes so enticing to read through. I saw somebody mention that it reminded them of Harry Potter. Now, the book is nothing like Harry Potter at all, but there is something about the feeling I got when I read Harry Potter that does remind me of the feeling I got when I read The Will of the Many. And maybe it's just something about, like, there's this young male protagonist who's overcoming other people's doubts and kind of sticking it to the man, so to say, that, you know, maybe that's the connection that I'm drawing. But yeah, I found the academy was, you know, a good part of the story, and didn't, like, just the fact that that's been done a bunch of times did not take away from this book at all. Still thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think that's about all I can talk about plot-wise without giving away spoilers. So I'll just talk about the traits of the book that I really liked. For one thing, I really enjoyed the pacing. I found the pacing to be incredibly quick, but I thought that it just worked really well for the novel. It kept me super interested and intrigued. Every scene was pushing the plot forward and raising the stakes. I just felt more and more anxious for Viz as things moved progressively forward. There's tons of good plot twists throughout the book. There were some twists that maybe I saw coming or had like a little bit of an idea, but I felt like those were mixed up with some really major plot twists that I just didn't see coming at all. So I started to doubt myself as the book went farther. I started to think, like, am I good at predicting this guy's writing? And do I see where the story's going? I was just really surprised a couple times. And that, again, that just kind of like brought me even further into the world, because I was trying to figure out what the fuck is going on and what's going to happen next. I did really love Viz as a character. I've read some other people's opinions now at this point about the book, and I think some people don't like Viz because maybe he's too smart or too capable. But you know what? Screw it. I just liked it. I don't, you know, sometimes I like an overpowered character. What can I say? I mean, if it doesn't work, then I don't like it. But I found this to work. I was listening to another reviewer, Dan Explores Books. He's got a good booktube channel. I'll link it up here, or where, here, something. I don't know how this works yet. But in one of his videos, he was talking about how he's learning how to read. He's learning how to read and think about books a little bit differently, where he's only worried about whether or not he's enjoying the book. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's what you were saying. That's kind of how I felt about this book, where I could see flaws and things that I could critique as I was going through the book. If I really wanted to nitpick it, yes, I could pull things apart about this book that, oh, the prose isn't incredible, or the character's too powerful, yada, yada, yada. There were little issues that I could have pulled apart. But my experience overall is that I was really enjoying what I was reading. I was sitting here like working during the day, and I just couldn't stop thinking about the book. The book was like sitting back on my couch over here, and I couldn't wait to get back to reading at the end of the day. And for me, that's what matters when I'm reading the book, is like, if it's a fantasy book or a story and not some like self-development nonfiction thing, I want to be enjoying what I'm reading. So yeah, I just really freaking enjoyed this book. I know I've said that like 10,000 times. It was written in a first-person point of view, which was a little bit off-putting at first. I don't think I've read anything else recently that had that first-person POV. But once I got used to it, I just didn't notice it anymore, and it just became another part of the book. I will say the ending to this book is just a major mindfuck. I have no idea where this book is gonna go in book 2. It's kind of like opens up a whole new wormhole at the end, which it could go in a couple different ways. If I was going to critique this, maybe in some ways it opened a little bit too many possibilities just at the last 10% of the book. But if anything, I'm just really excited to read book 2. You know, I just am super pumped to get my hands on it. So overall, just really love the book. It's got a great fun story, great characters, great dialogue, witty banter, a character you feel like you can root for, great supporting characters as well, like a great group of friends that you can become attached to. There was a love interest that felt natural and not immature. Also, I do want to make it clear, like earlier I compared this book a little bit to Harry Potter, but I would put this in a very different category than Harry Potter. Like, the violence in this book is way more intense than anything that's in Harry Potter. Like, there's definitely some gory, violent scenes in this as well. I think that's a good thing for me to make clear here, is that I feel like the story could be aimed at something young adult, but the content of the book is not young adult by any means, in my opinion. I think I'm gonna wrap up the video there. I recommend that you give The Will of the Many a read. I hope you found this review helpful in one way or another. If you liked the video, if you like what I'm doing on the channel, please like and subscribe, and I will see everybody in the next review.